Good evening. Welcome in. Gabe DeArmond here in Columbia, Missouri. Jarod Hamilton down in Nashville, Tennessee at SEC Media Days, where the Missouri Tigers were on the stage today, along with Texas A&M and LSU. This is the show where we talk about what people talked about, I guess. And first of all, I think we got to get the most important thing out of the way. First of all, appreciate Jarod always chipping in a little bit and contributing, but the Princess Chicken Fund for Jarod. And I want it on the record. That was the one Nashville restaurant I definitely recommended to you.
You did recommend, but it was Sunday, so it was like a weird situation with like a lot of restaurants. So I ended up going to the mall here. Like that's the first. I went to the mall to go to Charlie's and give me a cheesesteak. But hopefully I can get to that. You know, they got valet for this hotel game, so I've been real like trying not to leave too much, basically.
Oh, I got you.
So you see, I'm a team player, Gabe. I ain't trying to run. I'm not trying to run up a check for no reason, man. I'm trying to see what's in walking distance.
I appreciate that. And I can say from having been at SEC Media Days, they do generally take pretty good care of the media. There's plenty of food and drinks and stuff around the hotel. And once you get going, it's a relatively busy day. So it started this morning at 11:30, I think, with Greg Sankey. I'm going to take a guess that with Brian Kelly and LSU and then Jimbo Fisher and A&M, Missouri was kind of probably the least trafficked group of the three today. You think that's fair to say?
I'm imagining so. Now, I didn't actually really get to see or really hear too much of LSU and Texas A&M, but I mean, going into this, that's what we expected anyway, just because of who those coaches are and what those programs are, whatever the case may be. But Drink also, from what I remember, he didn't have anything real snarky to say, so he didn't put himself in the headlines with something that was. I mean, today he had I said he was on his best behavior when I was talking to Neil. He was on his best behavior today, so everything went smooth.
Yeah, and do want to invite you guys, if you've got comments, questions, anything you want to know about, anything you want to hear about from today down in Nashville, put them in the comment section. We'll definitely get to them. Drink. I talked to him earlier this summer, and after the whole deal at SEC spring meetings, like he was pretty intent to go down there and say nothing that could even be conceived as controversial. And he admitted on Feinbaum, he's admitted to us before, like there are times he says some things that get him in a little hot water, but he was not going to do it today. And I thought the reason, I don't know what he said to you guys, but what he said in the portion I watched was, hey, I think we've got a good team. These guys have worked too hard for their coach to come down here and be the one that steals the spotlight, saying something silly in the media. So I assume that was kind of his approach because you guys had like a 45-minute, hour-long breakout session with the Missouri guys beforehand.
Right. And I remember thinking, this is not enough time. It was more than enough time. It was more than enough time. He didn't, I guess, say that, but he showed that by the way he was answering things. Like it wasn't a me type of thing, or let me talk about another program. He was worried about Missouri and what they got going on. But like I told you, like an hour before we got on here, most of the stuff he said, if you guys have been, reading along with the articles and stuff I've had throughout the offseason, it's a lot of the things that we've already been talking about, whether it's position battles and who may be out in front, or maybe the changes on the offensive line, changes at the edge. The only thing that I didn't really know coming into today was him, Coach Baker, and Coach Poe going to be helping in on special teams. That's kind of only really the new gem that we didn't really know about.
And that, I mean, look, whatever they did last year on special teams didn't work particularly well. So trying something different certainly would be welcome. I mean, and that's the thing. He said today in his opening monologue was basically listing every scholarship player on at least this year's roster. He also may have mentioned some from last year and next year and 2010. And, he listed off pretty much everybody that's ever been associated with Missouri football. But, I mean, the point is, there's 18 starters back on this team. Like, as far as position battles, major camp questions, there really just aren't that many with this team.
Right. And like, it's funny though, because Dave, Drink said because you weren't there, he was like, well, we'll give it to Dave to ask the first question. And Dave was just like, spell out your quarterback's name. And he spelled it. He spelled out the word quarterback. Yeah, but besides quarterback, and I would say quarterback, left guard, and defensive end, those are really the positions where but for a lot of positions, they know what they're doing. He was really excited talking about the wide receiver room, like the depth they've got there. Somebody he mentioned Mekhi Miller. Like, I think that's probably somebody who may be one of those first guys off the bench, being a slot guy. He was excited to talk about the receivers. He was excited to talk about the safeties, the defensive tackles. Like, if you guys read the preview, I said something. One of my questions was, will the secondary have to do more since, with kind of a lack of a pass rush, since we don't know what they've got at defensive end? And Drink was like, well, I don't really think that's the case because we're good up the middle. Got defensive tackles, got linebackers, got safeties, and they're already an aggressive defense. Blake Baker isn't afraid to blitz linebackers or whatever the case may be. So he was like, it's not like we're running a 4-man front and we're worried about it. And that's something I didn't really think about, obviously going into it. And that's what I just put in the takeaways. Like, maybe you don't have to worry as much about defensive end, and they're in a good spot to only have, just a handful of positions to worry about. They're important, of course, but they're not stressing as much as, I guess, everybody else on the outside is.
Yeah, the way I put it today, like, it's a weird deal because it's a team that doesn't have very many questions, but the two questions they have are like the two places you don't want questions. Huge. They're the two most important questions, right? It's like going into the test and saying, oh yeah, well, I know all the multiple choice stuff. The problem is the essay counts for 60% of the grade.
The written word. Yep. Yeah, that's where it becomes a bit of an issue. But he solved some questions to the quarterback thing, as far as he's not afraid to take this into week 2. You guys look at what the takeaways and some other stuff I've written today. We kind of said something the last podcast about would he do this. He said game 1, and he didn't, and it wasn't like he was kind of beating around the bush with it. Dave asked game 1, would you be willing to have 2 quarterbacks or multiple quarterbacks play? And he's just like, yeah, I don't see why not. And because of the non-conference schedule, how it's set up, they can do that into game 2, comfortably into game 2, and maybe game 3 versus Kansas State is when we kind of see who's really that person. But they're gonna extend this as long as it needs to be and let the competition decide itself, kind of like unlike last year, how it was pretty quick and they knew after about a week or so.
Well, and I think in Cam's asking about this, it seems like he's normally ridden one guy. Well, I think that's because he's only had one guy. Like, he just kept playing. He made the decision last year with Brady Cook because, like, I don't think he felt like he had any other options. Jack Abraham, look, good kid and all that, but it was an emergency, like, we need a body addition. I don't think anybody ever counted on Jack Abraham to be a starting quarterback here. Tyler Macon, we knew by the time last season came around that he was not the starting quarterback. And Sam Horn, I don't know if you heard Drink up on the podium because I don't know exactly where you were today, but like, I thought he had some fairly revealing comments about Horn in that, look, the kid's got talent, and I think baseball gave him some confidence. Last fall, Sam was trying to figure out how to be a college student and how to keep his grades up and how to keep his diet right and all that. Like, it is very, very rare for somebody to come in, I don't care how many stars you have, and be ready to be a starting quarterback in the SEC as a true freshman. I didn't take anything that Drink said about Horn as like a knock on Horn.
Right.
That's the natural progression of things.
Yeah, and when you, especially for these 4-star and 5-star kids, everybody just assumes they're just going to easily assimilate the process. They're going to be able to handle all this change, and that's not always the case. Like most college students, there's an adjustment period, especially when you're going halfway across the country. Him being from Georgia and all that good stuff. So it shouldn't be disparaging. He did mention a few times that while Brady Cook will enter fall camp as QB1, it's not by a large gap. It's not his. It's just going to be given to him. He said that on the podium. I did hear that. I was mostly writing through what he was talking on the podium because it wasn't too much different from what he told us. But it's Brady Cook, but it's not like Brady Cook and the others. exactly kind of how like he said on the come home tour, it sounded a little bit like more drastic. It's Brady Cook, and then it's, you know, Sam and Jake. They're not too far behind, and anybody can still win this competition.
Right. And I mean, the bar is somebody has to be better than Brady was last year. And if that's Brady himself, you know, fine. I think it's going to be kind of interesting though. And I know Eli knows this, like, and it's too bad for Brady because like Brady's a good kid who busts his ass and has never done anything but speak highly of this university and represent it as well as he can. There's a pretty big contingent of Missouri fans who, if Brady Cook wins this job, I think are going to like, he's going to have to go win them over. And they're not going to be, and part of that is because they've seen Brady Cook fail at times, right? The backup's always the better option because, like, we haven't really seen Sam Horn fail. We haven't seen Jake Garcia fail here. So that's part of it. But, like, I think it's going to be interesting if Brady wins this job. Like, I hope if he does that he goes out and just, I mean, lights it up those first 2 weeks because the first bump in the road, you know what's coming if he's the starting quarterback from this fan base.
I think him winning, if he wins this job, it says a lot, not only about him, but kind of about his competition. Because
right. Does it say more about him or does it say more about the other guys?
It's really a 50-50 thing because for him to not, well, I don't even remember seeing Brady Cook's face this, you know, since December. Right. So for the fact that we haven't really even seen him, let alone his participation in anything that, you know, we get access to, if he can win this job after off-season surgery, I wonder how much, for me, I'm leaning kind of much what's going on with Sam and Jake, you know, being former 4-star guys. What is it that I guess maybe they're not doing? I do think somebody just had a question of do we think Brady has gotten better if he's considered the starter? I do think there's something to that, and Drink noted earlier to us, kind of like he attacked that rehab process, kind of being on the sideline, seeing everybody else get those opportunities, and him not, I guess, being able to start this competition. You know, it seemed like he was trailing to start it. I guess that motivated him to kind of overdo it and work himself back into shape, probably a little bit quicker maybe than they expected. But that, I think, worked in his favor. And Sam, not that, you know, you want injuries, but Sam getting hurt, it kind of sets him back a little bit. Jay Garcia was still trying to learn the playbook and stuff like that. So in a way, they're kind of in similar spaces, but because Brady Cook knows the offense, he's a leader on the team, all that good stuff, that's where he's got that edge at.
And the one thing you would never say about Brady is that he shies away from anything. I mean, he takes the questions head on. He knows the situation. He knows everything that's being said out there. And so it'll be interesting. But also, like, I've talked to enough people, they understand the importance of this season. So if whoever the starter is, if it's not going well, I don't think he's going to be shy to make a change. I mean, if they look like they're, you know, if let's say whoever wins the job, if they throw 3 picks against Kansas State and struggle out of the gate against Memphis, like if he's starting to go, man, we're heading toward 5-7, like he's not going to sit around and let that happen this year. And now I'm not saying that making a change necessarily changes that, but he is going to try everything he can to avoid it because they haven't been shy about saying, like, hey, I think we got the most talent we've ever had here. We just got to figure out 1 or 2 positions and score more points.
Yeah, Drink. And when I was talking to Neil, he kind of asked me a question about what does it say about Drink being willing to concede, you know, play calling duties to Kirby Moore and stuff like that. I think he's becoming more aware,
yes,
of things and not, you know.
Is it fair because I'm almost 10 years older than him that I can say he's growing up? Am I allowed to say that?
I'm gonna say you can say it.
He's maturing.
Yeah, but he's understanding the situation of all of these things. If it's not working out, he feels like a quarterback change is necessary, that's what he'll do. He's seen that himself as the play caller. I mean, the first couple of seasons it seemed smooth sailing, but last year, you know, things kind of went off the tracks or whatever it is. And he said, okay, I need somebody who wants to attack. You know, kind of similar. I can still help with, you know, the offense, but I need somebody who can get it done and knows what that looks like. And they have that in Kirby Moore. And so, like you said, he's not going to be afraid to make changes this year. He better not be, because the last couple of years you've been telling me you've been telling everybody. He starts the year saying we're going to be more aggressive. And then instantly by week 2, you see that it's not aggressive.
So today was kind of an interesting contrast in what we're talking about here, because like I will give you like this credit for sure. The first important thing is to recognize the problem. And he not only recognized the problem, he recognized the problem was him. And that's not an easy thing to do, right? And he said it today. He's like, I wasn't giving us the best chance. So about 45 minutes before Eli took the stage, and I know you didn't see Jimbo Fisher talk because you were up doing interviews. But Jimbo Fisher, like the last 2 years, A&M fans have been like, yo, quit calling plays, hire an offensive coordinator, and Jimbo has never done that in his career. So he brings in Bobby Petrino, and somebody asked him today, what's the dynamic like there? Is Bobby going to call plays? You've never really given that up. And Jimbo just flat didn't answer. I mean, he just he didn't say anything approaching an answer. So, hey, Jimbo Fisher's won a national championship. He's been a coach for a long time. I'm not saying he doesn't know what he's doing, but I'll give Eli this. He's facing up to what the problem is, and he's looking for a solution. And now all that matters is whether that solution works or not.
Right. That's interesting on the Texas A&M thing, because, I mean, I guess, that happens. Hiring an offensive coordinator, but head coach still being kind of the shot caller and stuff like that. I wonder how much of it has to just do with the day-to-day stuff and kind of managing that load of being head coach, but then also trying to focus in on one side of the ball for so much of the time.
Right. And, going back to, like, Gary Pinkel always had an offensive coordinator, but he would always tell us, look, if we line up 3rd and 1, I've got veto power. If the OC calls something and that's not what I want, I'm the head coach. I can change it. It's my responsibility. And I got so tired of hearing Gary say it's my fault. But like, that's what the head coach does. That's why he gets paid, in this case, $6 million. And I saw more of that out of Eli late last season and today than I think we saw the first 2 years. Like, I'm not saying he made excuses and blamed other people, but I think he's taken more of the brunt of that blame in the last few months. And I think that's a good thing. Had some other questions here. Dave had some questions about the offensive line. Seen enough out of Delgado at guard. Would you rather have the Oklahoma transfer, that's EJ Ndoma Ogar, or Xavier Delgado? And the interesting thing that you wrote about today was one of the offensive guard spots actually seems to be pretty solidified, and it's maybe not who people thought it would be.
Yeah, so that right guard spot, it's Armand Mimbou's, and there's two players on that line where they're going to name them starters if they haven't technically already, and they're not going to think about it again. So obviously Javon Foster, he's obviously up here, so you know what that means, and it's Mimbou. I mean, KAD he's not going to have any contact with the offensive line that much, but everybody else, Drink, Robinson, Foster, they were really, really high on them. But like we've been kind of feeding this a little bit, since the end of last season when he started playing. But like this time, he's going to be a star. He's going to be special. He's got so much flexibility to move around. Go ahead.
So here's the question I have for you. Let's say we get into that Kansas State game, and Marcellus Johnson ain't working at right tackle.
Mm-hmm.
Do we see Mimbo out at tackle and Johnson in at guard, or and again, there's the possibility of, hey, we're not talking about Val Erickson or Tristan Wilson or some of those guys that might be like, I fully expect Val Erickson to be the 3rd tackle, like the swing tackle on this team.
Right. Well, if Marcellus Johnson is struggling with that transition from left tackle to right tackle, I feel like I keep hearing enough about the reserve linemen and how their progression is to feel like they're going to get a shot more so than let's move Mimbou out to tackle. That's something they kind of want to save for next season. But I think the biggest situation at left guard, and to answer somebody's question, Drink was talking as if Delgado was going to be going in as the starter. But I think if he had to choose, he'd choose EJ. But the injury concerns, I think that's the problem. He's coming off, I think it was like a foot injury, an ankle injury that ended his season prematurely versus Kentucky. And I think he's healthy, but I feel like that's what's kind of stopping him from really saying it. But I think it'd be but I think the real issue is if Cameron Johnson, who Drink said has snapped the ball before, if he doesn't work out at center, they want to keep him on the field. Everybody was Javon was saying how good of a player he is. Like he couldn't even come up with words. He was just like, he's just a great player. Like I can't say nothing else. If he doesn't work out at center, though, they're not going to take him off the field. They're going to move him back to his natural position where, he was an all-conference guard last year. Then what do you do? Who do you have snapping the ball then? I think that would be a bigger issue.
And I would fully expect that Cameron Johnson is I guarantee, I don't know when that kid got to campus, but I guarantee as soon as he got to campus, like he was playing like Omar Epps in the program, carrying a football around campus. Just he had to bend over and snap it every 27 seconds.
Oh yeah. I know I said a lot of stuff kind of, and when I do my notebook, it's kind of going to be expanding off the takeaways. And I've got those questions. What happens if Cameron Johnson, isn't what they think? Because every time there's a transfer or something, everybody's assuming, they're going to play. They're going to be good at whatever this is. It's not always the case. Now, they don't feel like that, but it's still a question that what's the plan B if something goes wrong? I think they need to have that.
All right, let's hit. We're getting a few more quarterback things, so we'll hit it real quick. Not to be that guy, but with Sam Horn being diabetic, does that affect their decision to play? No. I mean, look, they knew that when they recruited him.
Yeah, that's not new information. And being a 4-star athlete, playing multiple sports, I don't think they're just like, sugar intake or something is going to stop them from anything.
I mean, look, they got world-class nutritionists that monitor. Like literally, Drinkwitz is up here saying, "Yeah, this guy weighs 262 pounds." Like they know exactly.
He didn't just do that with KD. Like randomly, he was like in his straight straws, like at 193 pounds. KD's 180 or whatever. He was like, I think they're fine when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah. Has to be Sam Horn for the future of recruiting or Garcia. It has to be the best guy. That's all there is to it. And if the best guy is Brady, then okay, he just has to be better than he is. Like this idea that this guy has to win the job. We don't see practice every day. We don't see these guys in the film room. He has to pick the best guy and he has to be right. And there's nothing more to it than that.
Right. I mean, what's better than playing your high recruits is winning. If they win, it doesn't matter who's on the field. Those recruits are still going to come, they're still going to come to the team. So it doesn't matter if the 4-star's playing if they're not the guy, who deserves to play.
Right. And like quarterback's such a weird position. It's the only position on the field where we keep track of one-loss record. Like Matty Mock is statistically the worst quarterback to play here in 20 years, but he is legendary because he went 10-2 and went to the SEC championship game, and so you can debate all day long how much of that was his doing and how much was the guys around him, but he was the quarterback for 2 teams actually that played in the SEC title game, and so he gets the spoils of that. John Hauser says breakout freshman. Drink mentioned a few today. He mentioned Ja'Kai Lang. I enjoyed that. Mm-hmm. He Serene Tukara, like he just gave up on. He like just kind of mentioned his first name at the end because he wasn't even going to try his whole name. But those are the two that I know he mentioned did, and I think he talked about Jamal Roberts too, maybe a little bit. I know he mentioned his name.
Well, when he talked about, he said his name, but when he mentioned it, it was kind of like, we have Tavares Jones and Jamal Roberts. It wasn't individual thing. He did say Joshua Manning's name as like somebody like who could come on in that wide receiver group, which is really, really deep. If Joshua Manning does that in this group, which he can, that'd just be a good sign of things to come then for that group.
Well, and there is potential snaps available there because I meant to mention this at the top. The one other newsy thing that kind of came out today was we think it's medical retirement for Chance Looper and Xavier Simmons. It was a little murky the way he worded it.
Yeah. And I'm still trying to, make sure I've got that correct. But medical scholarship was the term that was used. And I just believe that means at least for this season, but I'm thinking maybe their careers. Those guys will, education will be paid for, but I don't think they're counting against the team's 85, roster limit or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I want to address Matty Mock forever's comment here. Look, I have made it 47 years on this earth without a tattoo. I'm not about to start getting one of a 20-year-old kicker. But Jarod, I don't know if you were up for a thicker kicker tattoo if Missouri wins 10 games.
Absolutely not. I've got one tattoo. It's hard to get me to. It has to be very meaningful, and no disrespect, but the thicker kicker on my body it's not what's meaningful to me.
I will say this: if Missouri makes the college football playoffs and we get 1,000 new subscribers this year, I would consider using part of that money to get a tattoo. But I am almost positive, and by almost positive, I mean completely positive, that it will not be of Harrison Mead.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Oh yeah, somebody said Marvin Burks. KAD mentioned Marvin Burks. He also mentioned Shamar McNeil and how coachable he is, but he just called Marvin Burks a dog, and I had to spell it D-O-G. But when people say dog, we know it's D-A-W-G. So I think Marvin Burks is one of those people who can get into that too. They're kind of serious on him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because there's going to be somebody that people think is a pretty good player that doesn't get playing time in that secondary just because there's a lot of dudes.
It's a lot of dudes. And when I was doing the upside downside thing, I think I had it as Isaac Thompson and Tyler Hibbler. Isaac Thompson was a 4-star guy, but just haven't really heard so much because of, first off, the vets at the top, and then someone like Marvin Burks coming in there and Trevez Johnson. And I feel like I differentiate safeties and then the star, but they're all the same thing. They're all supposed to be able to play everywhere. And so once you combine the groups, it just seems like someone eventually going to get lost in the shuffle.
But before this show gets too serious, I want to go back to the tattoo thing for a minute. What if we reverse it? What if we could we get an NIL deal to get a Mizzou football player to get a PowerMizzou.com tattoo? I would pay for the tattoo if he could get it regularly on television.
Yeah, I like the thinking. Maybe we can use Darius Robinson. He has the biggest arms I've ever seen in person.
Yeah.
I put it on him.
He's only going to be here one more year though. I'm thinking I need bang for my buck. I need a guy.
Oh, okay. You need a younger
and I need somebody that I know is going to be on TV a lot, right?
Well,
what about you think Drink would get a PowerMizzou tattoo? I don't feel like he would.
Absolutely not. No. I have one in mind. We know a playmaker who's on the team was kind of young. I mean, Dalen Carnell.
Okay.
He makes plays. He's a young guy.
All right.
I mean, Pops, what you think about that one?
Yeah, we got to check into that for sure. I know he's watching this, so I expect a thread tomorrow about whether Dalen Carnell will get a PowerMizzou.com tattoo in an NIL deal.
Yeah.
Philip says more concerned about Kirby Moore than anything else. Can he field a winning offense in his first year in the SEC? So this is kind of interesting. I was listening. I watched more SEC Network today than I've watched in the last 11 months combined. It's just not a habit of mine, but they're talking to one of the guys, and it slips my mind who it is, but they were asking about A&M's offense, and he said something interesting. He said, the truth is most of these teams, the playbooks aren't that different. The concepts aren't that different. It's about a couple things. It's about, first of all, it's about kind of how you present it, formations, and how you mix things up. But then it's also just about the guys running the plays. I just watched a binged quarterback last week, as I'm sure you did. And talking about the game icing or the final touchdown in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs are in the wrong formation, but they just have guys that figure it out, So I'm not saying that the play calling doesn't matter, but Kirby Moore's a smart dude. He gets football. He's not going to, it's not like he has to throw out his playbook because those were Mountain West plays and these are going to be SEC plays. It's more a matter of if he has the guys to run them.
Yeah, and while the Mountain West, I remember doing something when Kirby first got hired. It wasn't like the Mountain West. They had some good defensive teams in that conference that were I want to say top 50 defenses. So, but obviously that's not the SEC. But like you said, they've had players. They had Jake Hayner, who quarterback who got drafted by the Saints. They also had a good wide receiver unit. Missouri has a good wide receiver unit. It's to be determined who the quarterback is and what's going to happen in the offensive line and all that stuff. But like you said, it's no one goes in and says, well, now that I moved to the SEC, I've got to change this and that. It's not really that. Scheme is going to be relatively the same. He's just going to be more aggressive. And I think because of what they got with the wide receivers and some new thing, maybe a couple new philosophies, they're just going to be more aggressive about deep shots and getting the ball in the playmakers' hands faster.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like Coach Drink is leaning toward playing younger guys after reading articles. I'm just going to say, well, first of all,
playing what younger guys exactly is the
I don't
question.
think a ton of freshmen play on this team because so many older guys are coming back.
Right.
But also, like, you hear a lot of things on July 17th, right?
Yeah.
And then we're going to get to September 16th, and it's going to be 17-14 against the fourth quarter in Kansas State, and we'll see what happens.
Right. I mean, well, okay, if this is saying maybe not starting, but just getting in the rotation, because they have so many upperclassmen, I will say they probably are going to have to play these younger guys a little bit more than they did last year. Because a lot of these guys are going to move on after this year. Not everybody has. There's like a good number of guys whose eligibility runs out. So you've kind of got to see what you got. But like you said, I don't think that means, tight game or something. We're just going to, or they, not me, but they're just going to willingly, throw out, a younger guy just to throw him out. It has to make sense.
I think we put a lot more emphasis on see what you got and coach for next year than these guys do. Like, they're coaching for Saturday, man. And especially in Eli's situation, like he's coaching for 2023. And if that means he plays 22 guys that are all leaving after this year, then he'll just deal with next year when next year happens, especially with the portal being such a big part of it.
Yeah.
Too Simplistic says, hopefully we see some improvement with route running with Luther. Maybe I'm in the minority, but that seemed to be his flaw. I don't think route running was his flaw. I think holding on to the football was his flaw.
Yeah, I think because there was probably like 3 or 4 times throughout the year, the little drag routes. He's looking at the ball real quick, but he's already turning around, looking at what move he's going to do. He's so good in space that he's already thinking about what I'm going to do. But that led to drops. It definitely led to at least one interception versus La Tech. I remember that. Maybe another one somewhere down the line. I think that in the beginning of the season, we kept seeing those first few weeks, probably up into the Florida game, where it seemed like every game he kind of had like not an injury, but maybe he was helped off the field. It was limping a little bit, grabbing something. He eventually got used to that physicality, but I think it was just him adjusting to playing like men, SEC kids, in the league.
And I think too with Luther, like, I don't even know how I would assess his route running because the routes last year pretty much seemed to be turn toward the quarterback. We're going to throw you a swing pass and then you're going to make 2 guys miss. Like, they didn't do a lot with him. And I think that's pretty natural, right? Again, he was a true freshman. He was coming from a very uncomplicated high school offense. Like, I know he showed up early and I think he's a smart kid and all that, but that is a lot to pick up in just a few months. So I think I would be surprised if Luther had the disposal of the entire playbook, last year.
Yeah, and well, I guess lucky for everybody, everybody's gonna be starting from scratch in a way with Kirby Moore in the terminology, more so on the terminology part. Everybody's kind of gonna start over.
Yeah. So this is something we haven't really talked about. The biggest thing Drink said today was with Burden switching positions to go to Lovett's slot position. So 2 ways to look at this. First of all, do you think Luther Burden has better numbers this year than Dominic Lovett had last year, which would be about 850 and 3 or 4 touchdowns?
I think it was 56 for 846 and 3 touchdowns. He puts up similar, but it's hard because then that brings up another question of the quarterback play and the offensive line play. And can they get the ball? Because I'm thinking he has a little bit less, but that's because they have more weapons. They have more people who can do things. And because no disrespect, but Toski Dove out there, a lot of times, like he wasn't getting a lot of catches. He wasn't doing what he was doing the year before. So a lot of times he was just out there blocking or he wasn't getting targets and stuff like that. There's a lot more room to spread the ball with guys they're comfortable with. So I could see it being no, but also if the offensive line plays bad again and they just need to get the ball out quickly, I can see him racking up stats like that because it's just, where's Luther at? Let me throw him the ball because he's a playmaker.
Right. So that that was going to be my second question. I'll get to in a minute. First of all, I think Luther could exceed the total offense numbers of Lovett because I think he's still going to run the ball and get some jet sweeps and things like that. And the most amazing thing about last year was every time they tried a jet sweep with Tom Lovett, it lost like 27 yards and he just got destroyed. Like I never saw it work. So I think he might get a little more, but the second part of my question was going to be, okay, even if Burden doesn't have more than Lovett had, do Missouri's top two guys have more than their top two guys did last year? Their second leading receiver was Barrett Bannister, who had right around 500 yards. So they had two guys for about 1,350. I think their top two receivers exceed that, even if Luther doesn't exceed what Lovett did.
Wait, so who would you consider the second guy necessarily?
I would assume this year it's going to be Theo Weiss.
I feel like it could be.
Could be Cooper. Could be Makai Miller.
But that's not really what I'm arguing. I'm thinking like instead of maybe their top two guys having, maybe that does happen. But I'm more so thinking I could see maybe 4 or 5 guys who have maybe 200 or 300 yards, and maybe Luther's the one who has the 700-800 yard thing. But there could be a lot of people who kind of help out and pitch in a little bit more. That's the way I was thinking about it.
I think they'll have at least 3 guys over 500 yards receiving this year. You buy that? And I don't know which.
That goes back to the quarterback and offense. If the offensive line plays well, I think that's my key more so than the quarterback. I think the quarterbacks can get it to these guys because these receivers are pretty talented. But it's on the offensive line. They can't get all those yards if the quarterback is getting sacked or whatever the case may be and getting pressured and throwing crazy passes. So it's a caveat to it.
Dave wants to know if you think Blake Baker is a little bit overrated. I want to say Jarod is not old enough to remember this, but I'm old enough to have watched the Steve Wilkes defense in Columbia, Missouri. What Blake Baker did last year was a damn miracle. Like that was an incredible turnaround with really mostly the same guys. The two differences would be Tyron Hopper, big difference, and the guy that I don't think was talked about enough last year, Christian Williams.
Yeah. And Dave here says no disrespect to Nicholson or Devin Nicholson, but switching Bailey really seems to completely change the whole defense.
It did.
Yeah, we talked about this not too long ago when Chad started getting some mic reps. Was it kind of at the end of that 21 season and through last year? I mean, he's pretty solid. He's a good tackler. He does what he needs to do. He's not great in pass coverage, but I mean, he does at least one thing pretty well, and that's stop the run. Is Blake Baker overrated? I mean, you can't really say nothing until you see this year, like, until some games.
Right. Like he's got to go back it up.
Yeah, he's got to go back in and see what he does. But or maybe I think next year also will be a good kind of thing because they're losing so many. There's a lot of guys leaving next year. So maybe let's see what he does when he doesn't have all these returning starters come back.
Hey, you know what? If he's good enough, it ain't going to be his problem. It's going to be somebody else's problem because he's going to be a head coach somewhere.
Yeah, that's probably a fact.
Dustin brings up a point. Tight end is a completely forgotten thought. I mean, I don't know. I guess they'll play a tight end this year. Leading tight end more than or less than 15 receptions this year.
I'll go less. I do think there is somebody who can get to double digits, but I go less. And the way I feel about kickoff returns and how they need to just kneel and fair catch it every single time because they was averaging 16 yards on kick returns and a fair catch or whatever he doesn't get you to the 25. They need to do that. They need to go back to the 6 offensive lineman thing. If they're going to have somebody out there, it needs to be somebody who can at least block. And they feel like Norfleet can do that, but while he probably plays and maybe one of those top 2 tight ends, I figure it really hard for a high schooler to come into the SEC seeing that blocking translate like that, even though he has the size. That just sounds very hard.
Yeah, but I've seen nothing from these last 3 years to indicate that the tight end is a major part of the passing game. Now, look, if they were to go out and sign Brock Bowers, I'm sure the tight end would quickly become a major part of the passing game, but they don't have that on this roster. So, all right, man, you've been working all day. I don't want to keep you here all night. Just give the people an idea kind of what you got coming up, because to be fully transparent, Jarod is not hanging around to listen to a bunch of people that are not associated with Missouri talk the next 3 days, heading back to Columbia tomorrow, but you got plenty of stuff. So what's kind of coming up the next few days here?
I'm just kind of, well, at least for tomorrow, because I probably head out maybe around like 9 or 10 a.m. or something like that. But at least for tomorrow for the notebook, kind of gonna again expand on the takeaways. There's a little bit of meat I left off the bones. Just want to add some more quotes and a little bit more perspective on some of those things that we were talking about earlier. Feature wise, I gotta think about it. Maybe I talk about Drink's humility and giving up that the reins and as far as calling the plays to Kirby Moore. I don't think it's not like he said a lot about it or stuff that we didn't know, but kind of rehashing that like he's understanding what's going on. He's understanding the offense has to improve, and him being an offensive coach, they can't have another season like that, and you can't expect your defense to win you even 6 games playing that well on defense, but then your offense not playing up to the standard it needs to.
That's the thing, man. This is going to be my 21st season. Defenses like last year they don't come around every year. You can't waste them when they do. Their NIL efforts, their recruiting efforts this offseason was, we need Ennis back. We need KAD back. We need Darius Robinson back. We need Jaden Jernigan. We need all these guys to stay. You can't waste it, man. First of all, the defense has to absolutely live up to what it was last year. But if it plays that way, you absolutely cannot waste that with the offense they had last year. There's no question.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. They got to tighten up.
Also, man, I can't watch many more games like that Auburn game last year or that Vandy game last year. Dude, we don't get paid enough to sit through that.
Oh, man. My thing is, I only can really remember, the end of the fourth quarter and overtime, because obviously that's when all the craziness happens. But, when I was talking to Feinbaum earlier, I mentioned to him, that wasn't a good game. There was, a string of 7 points, 8 points back-to-back for both teams. It was pretty terrible, actually.
I just remember that day starting with your breakfast sandwich being too stale to eat, and then we're just sitting there and going, punt. Oh my God, they punted. Oh my God, they punted again. Yeah, that was a terrible day of football.
Whataburger for breakfast. That was just sitting there for hours. I don't know when they picked that up. That
they put those out on a Wednesday.
For you Whataburger fans, you guys lucky. Drew swears by Whataburger, and so I had some when we went to the U.
No, it's
all right. It's definitely better than that experience, because I was ready to rip it up. That was terrible, but hopefully, the offense for everybody's sake is much better, because the 14-17 or even the game versus Kentucky where it's just drag until kind of the end of the game. No one wants to see that.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, go get yourself some dinner. Appreciate it. And we will see you back. We'll start doing this. Fall camp's 2 weeks away. We assume we don't have a calendar yet, but whenever we get the calendar, a couple days before fall camp start, we'll be back to weekly shows. Appreciate you guys joining us. Had a pretty good crowd here for a Monday night. So if you're watching on YouTube, thanks for being here. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, do all that. We'll put the podcast up after this. Make nice comments on social media and rate us highly. And Jarod, travel safe, man. We'll talk to you.
All right. Appreciate you.